maybe we can spin this conversation in a positive direction with the money coach, Fran Halloran, because we're going to talk about the business of college athletics, and I think it's changing quickly. And as I said in the first hour to open the show, I don't think the NCAA was ready. I don't think school presidents were ready. I don't think conference commissioners were ready for the business of college athletics to change. Not only were they not ready, I think they're probably ill-equipped for the conversation. And Fran Halloran is not. So let's see, do we have the money coach with us?
Hey, Smitty, how are you, sir?
Oh, Fran, I know it's been a long day. You were filling in for Kevin Cohen today, and so you've already given your brilliance to everybody. So thanks for doing a little overtime with us. Yeah.
I can assure you that the folks who were listening to me during the afternoon drive would laugh out loud if they heard you talk about my brilliance on the afternoon drive. But thank you for the kind words.
Well,
I do the best
Coach,
I can not to sink the ship.
Yeah, you just make up for it now. But I love having these conversations with you because I feel like, you correct me if I'm wrong, you were somewhat excited because you have a background, obviously, in finance and financial planning, but also in coaching and working with young people, and you care about that. You care about athletics. So to see those two worlds merge a little bit, while there will be bumps along the way, I think you almost find it like what a fascinating petri dish this is for you to observe, right?
I do. And let me be brutally honest with you. I don't know that I'm going to have a whole lot of good news to share with you about this because I 100% agree with what you said a moment ago in the intro, that college athletics is not ready for this. And when I mean that, I mean the NCAA is not ready. They weren't ready for NIL, and that's been proven. They're not ready for private equity to become a part of college athletics. They're not ready for the business of college athletics. You see, universities have been, quote unquote, playing the business game for ever and ever, but they've been playing with house money. They've been playing with taxpayers' dollars and boosters' dollars. That's it. They've never had to be profitable. Once you enter into a relationship with private equity or let's just say capitalism in general, there's no more charity. There's no more, but we're improving. You will have essentially a situation where, just like in the business world, when you have a publicly traded company, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the stockholders to be successful or you're out. And this is where we are headed. And I realize people are going to think, you got to be kidding me. This is not going to happen. It is going to happen because once private equity gets involved and they start investing in college and university programs, they will have more say-so than anybody else on the playing field. I'll give you an example of how powerful private equity is. I know a gentleman who owns a construction company, and he has private equity money in that construction company. And a number of years ago, the private equity firm came to him and said, we're going to pay this much money per unit, not a penny more. And you know what the owner of the construction company said? Okay, because private equity is funding everything he does now in his construction company. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. There's no, but this costs more or that costs more or this is going to be, there's none of that. Once private equity gets involved, it's their way or the highway. And colleges and universities are not ready for this because they have been essentially temples that are untouchable. I use South Carolina as an example. Ray Tanner, wonderful human being. My wife has had a relationship with his wife from her time at the university. The Tanners are fabulous people. He is not equipped for what is about to happen when the private equity firms begin to say, we want this to happen. We want this to be profitable. You're not getting it done. What's he going to do? So we're entering a brand new phase of college sports. College athletics, as we know it, dead. I hear Phil lamenting this all the time, but it's dead, Smitty. Dead, dead, dead. We may as well call what's coming the Association of Collegiate Professional Sports.
So, right, it'll be College Athletics 2.0, and that's fascinating. So let me put a pin in it right there. This is Fran Halloran joining us here, the money coach, with a background in coaching. So he's somebody. He's not just schooling us on the financial side here. He cares about athletics too. So we'll get to that in just a few minutes. I would ask you this, Fran. One of the things that we have heard is coming is that players may be eventually they're going to be like labeled employees and no longer student athletes. And I would ask you, I just wonder, you just talked about how the NCAA essentially was cursed by prosperity, right? They had it so good for so long, they didn't know what else it was like. I would wonder if you were advising the players just as a collective, as a whole, would you tell them maybe to pump the brakes on that? Because aren't there also drawbacks to being an employee?
I would go so far as to say that the model you're going to see come to fruition is going to be very much like professional football. These great players are going to have agents. It's going to happen. It's going to happen very soon. And you'll no longer deal with player, mom, dad, uncle, auntie. You won't deal with those people anymore. You will deal with a professional agent who is schooled in negotiations and value for the asset. And that is going to really put college athletics in a quandary because, again, these coaches are not going to be equipped to deal with that kind of complication, if you will. A kid is going to have a great basketball player, a great football player, a great baseball player, a great softball player, because this is going to transcend across all sports, Olympic sports, revenue sports. It's going to happen everywhere. The investment that's going to come from private equity and capitalism is going to fund everything. It will never pass the smell test or a court test where we're only going to put this kind of money in men's basketball, football, and a few women's basketball programs or a great baseball program. It is going to filter down to every single sport. So I would, if I were advising players, I would already be talking to agent-type people who can represent my interest in some way, shape, or form, whether I'm doing it on the table or under the table. I would be getting my advice and counsel from someone who has a professional knowledge of the value of sport and the value of sport with me in it. If I was one of those great athletes that could command those kind of negotiations, if you will.
All right, now let's get to the part, which is, to me, the part that I think that most of our audience cares the most about. If you will, put your coach's hat back on, or the fact, hey, I like watching college football on Saturdays. When we watch those games and you see the collegial spirit, when you see Penn State fill their stadium and have a whiteout, when you see Virginia Tech and Enter Sandman, when you see the tailgating scene on College Game Day on Saturdays, that's what we don't want to lose. And so far, to me, all the noise outside, NIL, transfer portal, everything else, court cases, between the lines, college athletics has still been great. College World Series was great. NCAA basketball tournament was fascinating. The college football season was as good as ever. So that's what we want to protect. So we need to make sure we almost protect the school presidents and players and agents and private equity, as you're saying. We have to protect them from themselves, because that part of it is what is actually what brings the value, right? That's why the networks will pay. That's why the universities will have money to pay players, and collectives will have money to pay players. So what would you tell them about treading perhaps carefully? What guardrails or safeguards would you suggest that we've got to keep the spirit of the game, because you've got to keep your eye on the ball if you're going to continue to have value?
Well, once again, it will come down to profitability, especially when private equity really enters into the fray. And private equity is smart enough to know that the product, in this case, the Saturday game day product, is not something they want to mess around with. Think of it from a business perspective. If I'm already creating the greatest widget in the world, but I want to accept more investment dollars from investors, those investors are going to say, we want the return on the investment. We don't really want to mess with your perfect widget. We hope that is the nature of the path, if you will, that is going to be forged forward. I can't say for sure that that's going to happen, because the ego factor is going to come into play even more so than it has with the onset of NIL. And there will be jealousy as well, because let's be honest, if you've got a quarterback playing in the SEC who's negotiated a deal with this college or university, and he's making $3 million a year as your quarterback, which is very possible, very possible. Remember what Matt Rule said last year: a great quarterback in the transfer portal, John, is going to cost me $1.5 to $2 million. So $3 million is not out of the realm of possibility, right? The punter, the offensive lineman, right? The long snapper, those guys, there's going to be some envy. There's going to be some jealousy, and that is going to upset the product for a time until we get used to the new norm, which, yeah, I'm going to college and I'm driving a 2001 Ford Ranger, and the guy that I'm snapping the ball to is driving a 2026 Maybach Mercedes. Things are going to change. Hopefully the product on the field doesn't change, but I would argue it's already changing, and there's nothing we can do about it. The genie is out of the bottle. And you mentioned television in an earlier segment having so much control. The control that private equity is going to have over college sports will pale in comparison. The television control will pale in comparison to what private equity will have. You mark my words.
That was the question I was going to ask. So let's use a real-world example. Fran Halloran, the money coach, joining us here on Sports Talk. A real-world example. The email that leaked yesterday was between the ACC office and Clemson, and what was happening was the ACC office was trying to pressure Clemson to move their rivalry game with South Carolina to Black Friday, and they were giving them all of these concessions. We'll do this. You'll be playing the Citadel at this time. You'll play a home game in Labor Day 2027. They were giving them all of these carrots and coming to the bargaining table. And what you were suggesting, if I'm hearing you right, is in the future when ESPN makes that call or sends that email, it will not just be to Athletic Director Graham Neff. There will be a private equity firm that will also be CC'd on that email, and they will have a seat at that table in that discussion.
100% correct. And that influence is going to be greater than the television network influence, because private equity has already said, we're willing. And you got to understand the money involved in private equity. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars in some cases. Private equity has already said, we're willing to put $20 million to $200 million we're willing to inject that into a program right now, into multiple programs. They're not just giving that out of the kindness of their heart. They're going to expect return on investment. And that means they're going to want to control the background. They're going to want to see that the athletic department is being run properly, like a business and not like a 501c3 charitable organization, a la university. It's going to change everything. Hopefully the product on the field doesn't change, but I have every reason to believe that that's going to change as well. And I think one day there will be a completely separate division in college sports. There'll be, right now we have Division 1, 2, and 3. I don't think you're going to see this really, winnowing down to Division 2 and Division 3 sports, at least no time soon. So it could be that this Division 1 powerhouse group of college sports, they get to reap the benefits even more so than they are now. And the true Saturday afternoon 2 o'clock game between Furman and Georgia Southern is still going to be around to give us our fix, if you will, for the old days of college football or the old days of college basketball or baseball, whatever we're into. But things are going to change because anytime money gets involved, especially money at this level, there's no way for it not to influence every aspect of what is going on in that program.
And Fran, and I think maybe, we're jumping off of the conversation you had previously a couple of weeks ago. I want to make sure everybody understands this, and I want to make sure that I understand it correctly. What you believe is the money will become so great, like you said, $2 million for a quarterback, to lure a quarterback, that at some point you've almost tapped out your current boosters, that you can't go back to Phil Knight for another dollar. That Walmart's not going to give Arkansas any more money for the next running back. At some point, the collectives are tapped. You've used all the money from the parking lot that you collected on Saturdays, and now you're going to have to invite like a Guggenheim or a Black Rock into the conversation, because if you want to continue to compete at the highest level and be Georgia or Alabama or whomever, you need an influx of cash, and you have to bring them in, or you won't be able to compete for championships in the near future.
Yes, but it won't be as well known as BlackRock or Guggenheim. But what it will be is someone who runs the Forest Fund, and the Forest Fund is housed in the same facility that BlackRock is in, and the Forest Fund is going to be BlackRock's independent private equity firm. And that's where you're going to see the influx of cash. And they will never be able to say no, because the race in college athletics has been on. The facilities race, for instance, has been on for the last 15, 20 years. Let's see who can build the bigger, better building for the football players, the baseball players, the basketball players, right? What we're about to see with the influx of private equity is going to make all of that look like chump change. I'm telling you that the dollars that will be injected into universities across this country will just spin people's brains. And as I keep saying, it's going to change everything, because they're not giving that money to a charity. At that point in time, it's no more the University of South Carolina athletics department. It is on the surface, it is in front of everybody, but behind the scenes, it's supported by private equity, and it's gonna filter down to the conferences. It's gonna filter down to the naming rights to conferences. It's gonna be the Rocket Mortgage Big Ten, right? It's gonna be I don't know, the General Motors SEC.
Oh, I can't wait. Johnson
to be everywhere.
Johnsonville Sausage presents Alabama Crimson Tide football Saturday. Oh no!
Yeah, it's going to change everything, man. And we are at the tipping point. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, but it's also going to be a little heartbreaking, because you mentioned this earlier. I'm an old coach, high school football for 12 and a half years. I loved every minute of it, and I love the purity of a Friday night under the lights. I love all the work that goes into it. But once money gets involved in anything, it changes the face of it all.
All right, Fran, we really appreciate you. We've got to go to break. Obviously, I'm going to have you back on, and we'll stay in touch on this, and we'll talk behind the scenes, and I'll bring some of your insight to the air. Thank you so much for the time, Fran, and we'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure.